Good evening and welcome to The Late Debate. Tonight we mark two political anniversaries, 100 years since women got the vote and 30 years since the birth of the Liberal Democrats. We start with the rollercoaster history of the Lib Dems.
If you keep very still.
January 1981 and Labour's lurch to the left is too much for some former frontbenchers. In what became known as the Limehouse Declaration, the Gang of Four created the new Social Democratic Party to try to woo voters in the centre. But the new party struggled and ended up in an uncomfortable alliance with the Liberals. The two leaders, David Owen and David Steel, became one of politics' more bizarre double acts.
STP! STP!
Don't you mean alliance, David?
Absolutely, David. SDP! SDP!
By 1988, the alliance had run its course and the two parties merged to form the Liberal Democrats.
We have come through our pain and agony.
In London, the new party began to gain ground, winning 7 seats in the 1990s.
Tether, Sarah Louise,
Liberal Democrat.
8,158 votes.
The Lib Dems even captured the Labour stronghold of Brent East in a by-election in 2003. With Sarah Tether, the Lib Dems now had 8 seats in London. But that was the high water mark. The 2015 general election was a disaster for the Lib Dems in London.
Hughes, Simon Henry Ward, Liberal Democrat, 17,000.
Even the veteran Simon Hughes lost Bermondsey after more than 30 years as the local MP. Last year, it was the turn of the Tories to hemorrhage votes, allowing a small Lib Dem resurgence in London. The party now has 3 MPs. To take a look back over the last 30 years and to ask what the future holds for the party, I'm joined by the Twickenham MP and Liberal Democrat leader, Sir Vince Cable. Sir Vince, thanks for coming in. First of all, 30 years old. Do you think the Lib Dems will be here 30 years from now?
Very much so, yes, and in a larger force. I mean, I think that the area of political space that we occupy, which is liberal but middle of the road, mixed economy approach, emphasis on social justice but also economic competence, that's what a large share of the British public want, and I think our movement will grow.
You were around at the time of the SDP. You were in Labour, joined the SDP, became a Liberal Democrat. Do you detect that we are in that same sort of era now that led to the creation of the SDP, that there's a gap in the market for a new centre ground party?
Well, we are that centre ground party, but,
no, but I'm asking is there a gap for a new one?
We'll happily reach out to other people. I mean, there are clearly large chunks of the Tory party which are deeply, deeply unhappy about the way Brexit is being pursued. Whether they make a break, I don't know, but they're very unhappy. There's a very large chunk of the Parliamentary Labour Party and of Labour Party members and voters even who are deeply disenchanted with the line which Jeremy Corbyn's taking, this pro-Brexit position supporting the government, and I think that may well result in a fracture, but I can't predict exactly how and when it will happen.
So with such disenchantment, have you been approached by any Conservative or Labour MPs?
I've been approached by Labour and Tory MPs who want to work with me and my party on a common approach to Brexit. We're not talking about defections. I don't know what will happen. I mean, there is a potential, I think, later this year for a major explosion if the Brexit process doesn't work out properly, and I'm afraid it will not. But as I say, how and when that happens politically, I don't know. But I'm happily working, as my colleagues are, on a cross-party basis in the Commons and the Lords to get a better outcome for the British people. So
you're talking to MPs on both sides is about Brexit, not about joining your party or setting up a new party?
No, I think that's premature. I mean, the fact is that Brexit is the big issue that dominates British public life. Unfortunately, it's sucking the energy out of government. I think there is a growing movement, which we have been leading, demanding that the British public have the final say. I think a lot of people are getting behind that, but that is where people are, and that's what they're focusing on, rightly so.
You say you'd welcome anyone from other parties coming to join you, but can you see if Brexit is going to cause this fracture, that there might actually be moves to set up a new party completely in the centre ground?
Well, it's not...
You must have heard the rumours.
It makes very little sense, actually, to do that. I mean, under the British first-past-the-post system, it's actually very hard work if you're a third party, as we've discovered over the years. This is not France. It's a different country with a different voting system. No, I don't think it will happen in that way. And, you know, we have to work with other people in other parties in common interest. This is what we're doing in the national interest. Something may come of that in terms of political realignment, it may not, but I'm focusing on the big issue which faces the country.
Well, you've become associated with the phrase exit from Brexit. Yeah. Have you seen any sign that it's gaining traction?
Yes, definitely. I mean, there is certainly a shift, a modest shift in the public in that direction. Much more important, a very strong move in the public on two levels. One, of feeling the government handled this very badly, and secondly, a wish to have a vote on the final outcome. And I think as that spreads, and we've been leading that argument, but there are people in other parties and public figures who are echoing it.
Would you be happy with a parliamentary vote rather than a second referendum?
I don't think that deals with it. I mean, I am a believer in parliamentary democracy. I mean, I don't think rule by referendum is a good system. But the fact is we have gone down the referendum road on Europe. That's the way the process has started. I think if Parliament simply contradicted the earlier referendum, I think that would be... It wouldn't be acceptable. Large parts of the public would be deeply disenchanted with the political process. So I think we do have to go to the public to give them the choice. At the end, when you've seen what the deal looks like, if there is one, do you want to go ahead with the deal the government's negotiated, or do you want an exit for Brexit? That choice has to be made. And I think there are large numbers of people across the political spectrum who see that now as the way forward.
But the Lib Dems' message on a second referendum didn't do much for you in the general election.
It didn't, and I think that was largely because it was premature. People took the view, we've had the vote, let's just get on with it, see what the government delivers. But I think as it's becoming more and more clear that we're going to get a pretty bad outcome. I mean, we can already begin to see from the first round the government's pretty much had to accept the European conditions, the very large
the government would challenge you on both those points.
And the only deal they're now likely to be able to get is a fairly weak Canadian-style agreement which does nothing for services, nothing financial services, nothing the things that the London economy depends on. It's going to be a very unsatisfactory outcome, and I think that as that becomes clear, the public mood is changing.
Can we talk about your party? London borough elections coming up. You hold one council of the 32, Sutton. What are your ambitions?
Well, I think we're making good progress in both my borough, Richmond, and in Kingston next door. I mean, I think that's where we're concentrating a lot of energy. I don't know what will happen in some of these inner London boroughs where you're now getting a fracture in the Labour Party between the extreme left and the current incumbents. I suspect a lot of people there will be reconsidering their position. But at the moment, I think the most likely progress is going to be in Conservative-facing boroughs like mine.
Is Brexit relevant in the borough elections?
I think it will be.
I mean, you'd like to make it,
well,
I'm sure.
Directly and indirectly. I think I would like to think local government's about local government and that people are making local choices, but it has become a kind of proxy for national feeling. But in addition, of course, European nationals will have a vote, and I think in many London boroughs this is 10% of the electorate, and I think a lot of them who felt very let down by the way the government's handled that issue of European citizens in the UK and British nationals overseas.
Can I ask you, is the toxic issue of tuition fees still damaging to the Lib Dems?
Not to a big extent. It certainly has done damage. We made a pledge, let's remember it was 7 years ago, to deliver a policy that couldn't be delivered in office, and clearly that was damaging at the time. What I remind people is, of course, that the Labour Party twice made pledges on tuition fees and didn't deliver them either, and the Tories similarly had a free tuition policy. So we've all let students down, but actually the policy that we did introduce in government, very controversial at the time, but it's actually worked in terms of finding a progressive system of payment, no fees, and it's funded universally.
Before we run out of time, just ask you about you. election, if the Parliament goes to full course 2022, will you still be leader in 2022?
Yes, that's my intention. I think when Roger Federer won his 20th Grand Prix event a few weeks ago, he said age is just a number, and that's the way I treat it.
Isn't it time to have a woman leader in the Lib Dems?
I would like us to have a woman leader. I've got a really excellent woman deputy, Jo Swinson. We work as a team. We've now got a very good team of women in Parliament. I want to see gender equality, and having a woman leader is part of that. It will happen.
But for the moment, you're the Roger Federer
I am, yes.
Lib Dem politics. So Vince Cable, thank you very much for joining us. Now, at the beginning of the week, next week marks the centenary of women getting the vote in parliamentary elections, although only if they were over 30 and property owners. But a century later, the total number of women ever elected to Parliament is still fewer than the number of MPs sitting in the Commons today.
This is the Countess of Ivor, member for Southend. This is Miss Pickford, member for North Hammersmith. This is our youngest member of Parliament, Miss Caslett, member for East Islington.
When Nancy Astor introduced a new intake of women MPs in 1931, she was already a parliamentary veteran. 12 years earlier, in 1919, she broke the mould of British politics, becoming the first woman MP to take her seat in the Commons.
Her Majesty, the Queen, has asked me to form a new administration, and I have accepted.
By the time the Finchley MP Margaret Thatcher became Britain's first woman Prime Minister in 1979, 60 years had passed since Nancy Astor entered Parliament. That same election saw the departure of another high-profile woman politician.
Williams, Shirley Vivian Theresa Britton,
Labour.
30,443.
Labour Cabinet Minister Shirley Williams lost her seat of Hertford and Stevenage. Today, she has strong views about how women in politics can make their mark.
There's room for women to make themselves known and to be heard of, but I think they have to be very careful about not being turned into sort of public figures who are just sort of on television and come dancing and that kind of thing. They have to be taken seriously and to be serious, because otherwise they will not have the impact they should have.
Someone else with firm views is former journalist Sophie Walker, now the leader of the Women's Equality Party, set up 3 years ago.
I think it's very interesting that in the years since Donald Trump came to power, we've seen a resurgence of the women's movement come together to say enough, time is up on politics that doesn't reflect women's needs and invest in their lives.
This week, the Islington South MP Emily Thornberry flagged up the gender gap in Parliament.
And the women behind me on these benches represent 1/4 of all the women elected in the last 100 years, but it is still not good enough.
Parliament might boast a woman Prime Minister and more than 200 women MPs, but when the Commons chamber is full, men still dominate the green benches. Well, to discuss the role of women here at Westminster, I'm joined by the Labour MP for Feltham and Heston, Seema Malhotra, for the Conservatives, the Sutton and Cheam MP, Paul Scully, and for the Green Party, the former London mayoral candidate, Baroness Jenny Jones. Welcome, all of you. Great. Paul, I don't want to exclude you, but can I just ask you, Seema, and you, Jenny, first of all, what, if any, sexism have you experienced or encounters with the Old Boys Club?
When I was younger and better looking, I did experience sexism, but now I'm in the House of Lords. I don't think anybody's got the energy, really. Certainly not for anybody my age.
OK, take us back to when you were younger and you were a victim of it. What happened?
Well, we're talking the 60s, basically, when you did get groped and people, you know, men grabbed you and made all sorts of advances and, you know, pressed up against you and that sort of thing.
Seema, what about you?
Well, I think what's been the case for many women MPs has been the question about whether you're taken as seriously as men because you don't quite fit the model. There's a very well-known story of Stella Creasy when she entered a lift and it was a time of a vote and being told that at that time you're only supposed to be in the lift if you're a member of Parliament. And, you know, there are ways in which you still feel that people either don't take you seriously or you don't notice you or you don't feel as visible. And some examples are, if I'm at a reception, it could be a business reception where it's male dominated, you do feel pretty much overlooked quite a lot of the time and you have to sort of fight to sort of have your place and have your voice heard. But I think what is definitely the case is that over the course of the last 100 years, and even in more recent years, the character and the culture of Parliament, and particularly the House of Commons, has changed. And if you look at the benches today, now that there are over 200 women elected, 208, and the highest number ever, debates like the one that we had today around baby leave wouldn't have really be debates that you would have had in the Commons in this way, with the kind of consensus that you're seeing today.
Paul, is it difficult for male MPs to engage in this debate?
I don't think so. I think it's something that the culture has changed. I think in the 80s and before, when you looked at Margaret Thatcher and Shirley Williams, they were having to really chip in and break down the barriers of a very, very male-dominated Parliament. Whereas now, I think the culture has very much changed. When you have people like Vicky Atkins and Nusrat Ghani that are got young families and balancing that, they talk about their families, they talk about their children, they talk about a lot of different issues. You look at Kemi Badenoch and Maria Caulfield that are up-and-coming MPs. And there's similar on all sides of the House, that you've got some really good inspirational people that are raising subjects that haven't always been talked about.
You've also got somebody like Harriet Harman, who I think has become an institution, even in the time that she's still a member of Parliament, who's the longest-serving woman MP and now the mother of the House. And I think what's been really important is to have somebody who's been able to keep pushing for change, because the reality is that we are where we are because of the way in which people have pushed for change within our own parties as well as within Parliament as a whole, and that is a debate that can
Harriet's got a long-standing record, I think, which everybody from both sides admires the work that she's done.
She's very supportive of women. But
That's quite something to hear Tory MPs admiring Harriet Harman. That wouldn't have happened a decade ago.
No, I think but it's
probably wouldn't happen much now either.
It's the long-standing. Well, no, I mean, I don't agree with everything she does, clearly, but I mean, like, you know, on that record and actually developing the debate, she's played a pivotal role. That it would be churlish to say.
Can I ask you, Paul, as a public figure in your community, you probably get invited to lots of events. I'm not suggesting you've been to the President's Club, but you might get invited to a rugby club dinner or something. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you thought, this is a bit uncomfortable, there's behaviour going on here I'm not so sure about?
No, I haven't been to anything in terms of the behaviour. I've definitely been to men-only events, but that was like a men's breakfast at a church, so it's sort of, I don't think there's any President's Club suggestion of that sort of things. And of course at some Muslim events when it's been segregated, which is something that I don't agree with, and but to change a whole culture overnight for a single event is very difficult for me. But no, certainly in terms of behaviour, there's nothing I've gone to in that regard.
You mentioned Harriet Harman today and the debate in the Commons about allowing women MPs who are pregnant to give proxy votes.
Not just women MPs, because it's also the case if there are fathers who are in the chamber as MPs, but potentially even to look at extending this to others who may have caring responsibilities. But the idea is that we should bring Parliament into line with other workplaces to actually have a proper baby leave, parenting leave policy, which currently there isn't for members of Parliament, but also to say, if you are going to do that, how do you make sure that you still have the representation for constituents in debates? And one idea put forward, which I tremendously support, is the idea of proxy votes should members of Parliament wish that, i.e. they could apply to have somebody who votes on their behalf.
Maternity or paternity leave, they can nominate somebody to vote for them. Would that get cross-party support, Paul?
I'm not sure. I think it's something that you'd need a good amount of debate for, really.
There was a tremendous... I know there was today.
I wasn't there. I was at the constituency this morning.
Luciana, Emma Reynolds and Andrea Jenkins, who had babies. They had babies in the days and weeks before the general election was called.
Jenny, what more do you think needs to be done?
Well, I think something like the proxy voting is a bit modern for the Tories. I think that one of the options is to have a fairer voting system. If we had a fairer voting system, then you would definitely get more women in. That would be inevitable. And also, of course, we sit at ridiculous times. In the House of Lords, we sit in the afternoon, whereas we could sit in the mornings, then finish at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock and have a normal life.
But I think we have an odd system. There's no way you'd probably make it up now if you were starting from the scratch. But on the other hand, you sit in the afternoons because you've got people coming from constituencies up in Scotland and all sorts of things. You have the advantage of the voting system that we have at the moment is that we can mix with ministers ministers and the Prime Minister, and it's really good for lobbying for constituency situations.
We were led to believe that the reshuffle would see more women in the cabinet. We ended up with the same numbers. What went wrong there?
I think if you look around the ministerial teams, there are more women, and if you look at the whips in Conservatives, for example, we've got some fantastic women that have been promoted there, and what that does, that really helps to change the culture of Parliament.
Well,
never have had a woman leader full time. And we know how the Labour Party can treat senior women politicians. We saw with Claire Coburn, the leader of Haringey, bullied out by sexism this week. And that's not a good track record, is it?
We've got zero tolerance for bullying and sexism in the Labour Party, and if anybody's got a complaint, they have to bring that forward, and it should be dealt with in line with the procedures of the Labour Party, and we all take that very seriously. Claire's had a very long-standing record, and she's achieved so much also as leader of Haringey, blazing her own trail also, and in local government. But whilst you're on the topic of women and leaders, we do know that there have been two women prime ministers, and both in Conservative Party, and that is a cause for celebration in terms of that achievement. We've had two acting leaders of the Labour Party,
but only acting, not full time.
But with very prominent people, prominent leaders who have brought about real change. Margaret Beckett was the first woman Foreign Secretary as well, and we've got. I think it's worth making this point that across the House we've got a woman leader of the House and shadow leader, a woman Home Secretary and shadow Home Secretary. So all of these things are hugely significant when we're looking at Parliament as a whole. It is also the case, I'll make this final point, that with the Conservative Party we have 26% of women in the cabinet. There are over 40, there's about 45% of women in the shadow cabinet, and indeed in the Labour Party in Parliament as a whole.
You mentioned modernising Parliament. Tom Brake, the Liberal Democrat MP for Carshalton and Wallington, has suggested getting rid of the conventional chamber, the adversarial chamber that we see in both the Commons and the Lords, and having a horseshoe, a hemicycle. Do you like that idea?
I think it's an excellent idea. It would create perhaps less antagonism between the different parties. Every new administration now does have that sort of shape in it. Up in Scotland,
I must admit, I can't stand the idea.
Too much like Europe?
I spent 2 years actually in Strasbourg as a member of the Council of Europe, the delegation of the Council of Europe, and essentially you have a seat for everybody. Half of the people aren't there, so it looks even more empty than the chamber does sometimes.
Do you like that, Seema?
And people are reading speeches, actually. There's no debate.
I'm not in favour of that change. But what I do think is that Parliament is more than just the chamber. So when you look at the way we have select committees, they are in different spaces and different environments, and they are cross-party. And I think we manage that incredibly well. There are some things about our tradition and about Parliament, which is the mother of all parliaments, that I think would be great to keep, but we absolutely know we've got a lot to do. We rank about 49th in the world for representation of women.
I'm going to have to stop you there because I'm afraid we have totally run out of time. Thank you to all my guests tonight, to Sir Vince, Seema, Paul and Jenny. I'll be back in the middle of next month. Until then, good night and thank you very much for watching The Late Debate.